Well, good morning. It is Thursday morning. We're looking this week at one another's in the Bible. And we look at, just as a refresher, we look Monday at loving one another, Tuesday at serving one another, Wednesday, bearing one another's burdens. And today we want to look at forgiving one another. Almost forgot that topic. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse number 32. If I can turn there, book of Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 32. It says, "And be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you." So, as we find in the book of Ephesians, the first three chapters give us who we are, our worth in Christ. And then the last three chapters talk about how we live in accordance to our worth who is in Christ. And so we are to be kind one to another, tenderhearted. Here's that word, forgiving one another. What is the word forgive? The forgive means not to hold something against. The idea is that we don't hold something against that person, hold it against their account. So does not mean that there's not some measure of restitution or restoration that needs to be made. But as we think of forgiveness, I'm not going to hold that thing against them, right? So as a Christian, I need to forgive them. Now, let's not just say, well, then that means I never have to know. We still confront, but what we don't do is let that thing, that hurt, that action, hold that against them, so that we cannot make restitution and restoration, but I give that, my right to get even with that person, with that thing. I give up that right that I have, that I think that I have. I give that to God, and I let God have that right. I let God have to take vengeance as he sees fit. So it's my responsibility to give that right, that of vengeance to God, so that I can prepare and have my heart prepared to have restitution and restoration be made. So I'm commanded to forgive, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven me, right? So in my sinful standing before God, he had every right to bring judgment down upon the sin that I had in my standing. But for Christ's sake, he is my advocate. He has taken my place. He has paid for my penalty of sin. And God has forgiven me for Christ's sake because of what Christ has done. So we're commanded. Colossians chapter number 3, let me read that for you if I may. Book of Colossians chapter number 3 and verse number 13. Forbearing one another, we'll look at that in days to come. Forbearing one another and forgiving one another. We're going to look at that forbearing. I think that is entailed with forgiving, as we see here. If any man have quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. Okay? So we are commanded to forgive, to take my right of get even with that person, giving that to God, having my heart prepared to be able to see restitution and restoration. Now, it doesn't mean that that person gets off scot-free with what they did. There's still a responsibility for us to confront that person and for the desire end to have restoration, whatever that may look like. Okay? But I am commanded to forgive, to not hold that thing against them, to not hold it against their account. But we see that there is still accountability, and ultimately God's going to hold them accountable. If there's no desire for restitution, restoration on either party's account, right? But I need to be willing, as Christ hath forgiven you, even as Christ forgave you. Now, how did he forgive? Well, let's look at 1 John 1:9. If I confess my sin, he, God, is faithful and just to forgive my sins and to cleanse me from all unrighteousness. Now, he does it perfectly, of course, but that's what I need to do. If I hold on to that unforgiveness, I will not forgive. That's going to bring in bitterness. That's going to bring in animosity and so on, and God cannot bless that. God will not bless a life that is filled with animosity, that's filled with bitterness, and so on. That root of bitterness will come in, and I cannot know the will of God. God will not continue to bless me in that regard. So we are commanded, if I truly love someone as Christ commanded me, and as I desire to do it as Christ does, then I will be willing to forgive. Isn't that a sobering thought? Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.